All right. Hi, today we are here with Renee Reisinger, a very good friend and a tremendous advocate for patients and wellness. So I wanted to take some time today to introduce you to Renee and give you an idea of who she is, why she does what she does, and talk about some specific things that are that she feels is really important for everyone to know about really health and wellness, not even just cannabis, but really how it plays into your life. So, hi, Renee.
Hello, thank you for talking with me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited. I know we've been talking so much about it because we share so many passions about it. But the interesting thing, because you are an industry insider, you didn't grow up as a cannabis fan like most people think. Stereotypically, people in this industry are always like stoners or weeders. You have a professional background as a nurse practitioner and caring for people that are using traditional Western medicine to help themselves, and you see a lot of value in it. And then you went and your eyes were opened, and like some people would just do a little bit of studying, but you actually went all in and got a master's degree in cannabis from the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. So welcome to this forum of understanding CBD, and I'd like you to just kind of give a short introduction of how you got here and like how this all transpired for you.
So this transpired, I have to say, because when I was listening to my patients, and I began to hear, their stories of healing using cannabis as medicine, I realized that I needed to try to understand this from a scientific molecular level up, so that I could better help patients with decision making on different care modalities.
So when you were dealing with your patients and you saw that they were struggling, and what was it that sort of led you to look elsewhere? Like, was there something that wasn't working currently? Was there certain signs that you noticed, like, hey, there should be a better way?
Yes. So one of the patients that I was discussing cannabis with back in 2017, 2018, was very kind to me, and he knew a lot about cannabis, and he quickly understood that I didn't. Um,
Sorry.
he introduced me to Dr. Raphael Mitchell's podcast, The Scientist.
Yeah,
Um,
this is what we get when we do live. Sorry about that.
oh, that's okay.
That's live for
So I'll go back to the question, how did I go down the rabbit hole with this?
you.
As I listen to patients describe their stories of healing and wellness with cannabis use, early in when Maryland went to medical cannabis in 2017, 2018, I had a young patient that was very educated about cannabis as medicine, and he quickly realized that I was not. And he was very kind to me. And he sent me a link to a podcast by Dr. Raphael Mitchullam, the Israeli scientist that we call the grandfather of cannabis. It's called The Scientist. And when I listened to the podcast and listened to him discuss cannabis as medicine and the endocannabinoid system, I realized, that I had a lot to learn. And as a healthcare provider, we need to always be willing and ready to learn new treatment modalities in Western medicine, alternative treatment modalities, such as cannabis. And when we say new treatment modalities, really, cannabis is not really a new treatment modality. It's been around for thousands of years. It's been used as medicine. It's been used for recreational purposes. We know the hemp plant's been used for building, rope, food. We're trying now to, discuss the stigma of cannabis use and its illegalization for the past 80 years.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing up Dr. Meshulam, and may his memory be a blessing. He recently passed, but what a contribution he's made in really identifying the endocannabinoid system. So, I don't think we can talk about the endocannabinoid system enough. And I know you really have an expert experience and you've studied it. Can you share with us, how this endocannabinoid system plays a role in our health, mental and physical health?
So I think this is something as healthcare providers that we should be educating ourselves about so we can talk to patients about it. The human body has an endocannabinoid system. It's the master regulator of every other system in our body. What we know, and there's new information being discovered all the time, but what we know is that our body has CB1, CB2 receptors, and those receptors are primed to process and use what our body already produces as cannabinoids, endogenous cannabinoids. One is called anandamide. It's very chemically similar to THC. The other is called 2-AG, and it's very chemically similar to CBD. So the hypothesis is that when we don't feel well, when we have pain, anxiety, insomnia, that our body's in an endocannabinoid deficit, and the quick Band-Aid fix is plant cannabis to restore us to health and wellness. So now that we've discussed this and now that we know this, the stigma of using cannabis as medicine needs to go away. In the same breath, like we would never shame a diabetic for using insulin. It's very similar comparison. Um, a resource that I recommend to all my new medical cannabis users is a book that was written by Dr. Patricia Fry. She's one of the leaders in cannabis medicine, The Medical Marijuana Guide. I love her book. The first part of it breaks down cannabis as medicine and science. And then the second part breaks down the path to wellness and other things that we can do to try to keep our body's endocannabinoid system healthy and tuned up. Healthy diet, stress reduction, exercise, meditation. Because like I said, the quick fix is plant cannabis. And oftentimes people will say, well, I always need plant cannabis. Maybe, maybe not. But I always encourage people to add in those other elements to wellness to help keep the endocannabinoid system healthy and functioning properly.
That's a good point. And a lot of people look for a happy pill, and they go to their doctor and they say, they're struggling and they're looking for a magic happy pill. Let alone do they not know that their body actually makes the happy molecule. This anandamide you talked about, it stands for the bliss molecule.
Yes.
Ananda was it a Sanskrit word or an Indian
Yes.
word for bliss? So your body's built with this system, and it is the sacred relationship between humans and cannabis and other plants as well. Foods we eat, things we do can naturally help this endocannabinoid system. So it's really great to hear that you've really dug in and learned about this and are here to share. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to get out, at least today, before we cut this live off, because we're going to talk again about and break down a lot of these complex topics that people struggle with. And the one thing that I really wanted you to talk about was the current healthcare system. When I talk to my customers, they say, Steve, I'm struggling. How do I use cannabis? And before we have this disclaimer that says, make sure you check with your primary doctor or your nurse practitioner that you're working with. Check with your healthcare provider. And we find quite often they'll go to their healthcare provider, and the provider seems as though they just either they don't know or they're not comfortable talking about it. As an insider, can you give us some insight to what is going on in here?
So, as a healthcare provider, we're held to ethical standards. There's the duty to do no harm, to do good, and the duty to promote autonomy. And I think if we're going to continue to practice that, we need to be self-motivated to continue to educate ourselves for Western medicine and for alternative medicines. And especially if our patients are asking us about it, we need to be able to meet them and, give them our medical opinion. So when you think about the duty to promote autonomy and shared decision making, at some point, providers need to self-educate themselves. Providers need to be in a healthcare system where they are allowed the autonomy of making decisions about what they discuss with their patients. And at some point, maybe this needs to be, maybe there need to be medical cannabis CEUs tied to our licensure recertification. If patients are asking providers questions about, cannabis as medicine, we need to be able to answer those questions for them. Cannabis use has a high benefit, low risk. It's not a no risk endeavor, but it's a low risk endeavor. And it needs to be discussed as a first line treatment option along with other Western medicine treatment options. And then, we can, as a nurse practitioner, then we can have those conversations with our patient.
Now, yeah, so you can talk to me on this podcast or video about cannabis as medicine, but if you're in a patient doctor relationship, are there restrictions on how what you can or cannot say?
Well, I think the fact that you raised the issue, that the disclaimer is discuss this with your provider, and our providers discussing cannabis as medicine with their patients. And if they're not, then I think, that needs to be, further explored.
Yeah, that's really one of my big questions is, and you mentioned that the provider should take this on their own as their own initiative. But with the pressures from the insurance companies on the doctors and the health institutions that load their schedules up, and they don't really have the time to, even just, treat the people that they are, this is something that they'd have to go above and beyond. And there isn't a direct correlation to either growing their practice or really anything. What's really to motivate them to take that initiative that you have? Because it's really rare.
Well, I think, that the person that you need to answer to is the one that looks at you in the mirror in the morning. And so, if you know that there's a treatment option out there that might benefit people that has high benefit and low risk, that would be, as a scientist, you would want to explore that. So, the natural curiosity and that desire to do good and do no harm. So harm is being done by denying people information they need to make informed choices. And I think that we need to also recognize, the duty to do good, beneficence, to do good.
Yeah, that's great because, and I think that if you're a practicing physician and you're listening to this, medical cannabis is available in a lot of states. And now in Maryland, it's recreational or adult use. So if anyone 21 years or older can have access to cannabis. And I love how you say it's not a no risk, because there's really risks with anything. Drinking water, there's a risk. But can you share what some of the risks are with cannabis? So we can just put that out there and inform people of some of the risks that are there. As you know, my biggest concern is now that cannabis is now available as alcohol. And yeah, we can say that, last year there were a couple 100,000 people that died of alcohol abuse and no one died of cannabis. But there are some things that you should be concerned about. Can you share a little bit about that?
So high THC content that we're seeing in our dispensaries is concerning. But the CB1 receptor in our brain, it will accept the THC molecule, but I want you to think of it like a sand bucket, like that CB1 receptor is a bucket and the THC is the sand. So once you fill that receptor with so much sand, it's not going to accept anymore. And then it just spills over into the cerebral spinal fluid. So it's first off, it's a waste of money for patients. It can cause problems, because you've used too much THC. And like we discussed with the endocannabinoid system, those CB1, CB2 receptors, it's like a constant symphony, and it will upregulate and downregulate on demand. So if you are overloading your CB1 receptor with too much THC, it will downregulate, and then you're going to find that you need even less THC because you have fewer CB1 molecules. And there's Dr. Dustin Sulak, who's one of the leaders in cannabis medicine, healer.com. He has a podcaster he's got on his website, how to desensitize, a 2 or 3 day program to desensitize yourself from too much THC overdose.
Well,
That's excellent.
Yeah, not to cut you off because there's
I'm
another
sorry.
question I have on related to that, but to translate that to people that are using cannabis, because you're familiar with this, we typically think about it as tolerance, and you can experience this while even in on a daily basis. If you were to use THC in the morning, it doesn't last as long, and then later in the day you're almost chasing that initial that relief that you're getting. So it even helps in a daily basis, but over time, the down regulation is your body is saying to yourself, these CB1 receptors, that anandamide, which are the natural bliss molecule your body makes, is such a small amount compared to how much THC you're bringing in. So your body's saying, hey, you're handling this yourself. I don't need to have all these receptors available, and they hide them. So that's where you're taking this endocannabinoid system, this master regulator, and you're taking that out of balance. So there are a lot of things that you can do. How does CBD play into that role in the endocannabinoid system? Does it work the same way as THC, or is it a little different?
So that's an excellent question. I think that scientists just have some understanding of how the anandamide CB1 receptor, we know there's CB2 receptors. And what I had, to the best of my knowledge, we know CBD works, and it helps improve health outcomes. I think there's still a lot of questions about how does it work, and that is, that's being researched. When people talk about cannabis as medicine in the U.S. and say there's not enough research, there's not enough research in the U.S., but the rest of the world did not stop doing research when, we've had this past 80 years of illegalization. The International Alliance for Cannabinoid Medicine is an excellent resource for international peer-reviewed, randomized controlled double-blind studies. There's a plethora of research out there. The Society of Cannabis Clinicians is an excellent website, a nonprofit that was started in the U.S. and California, and I think it recently hit it recently hit an anniversary. It started in California because the same thing as we just talked about in San Francisco, when the AIDS epidemic started, we were seeing people die of AIDS, and then there were some people in the community, family and friends of people that were dying, and they found that if these patients were able to access cannabis, it helped with pain, it helped with nausea, it helped with appetite, and because there were a few physicians that were pioneers in trying to bring about the legalization or access to hospice patients using cannabis. So the Society of Cannabis Clinicians nonprofit organization really started in California, and they have an excellent research library. It's peer reviewed, a lot of randomized controlled double-blind studies. So the research is out there.
That's a good point. Yeah, there is a lot of research. There's tens of thousands of years of use with humans in cannabis, and my personal feeling is that instead of waiting for an end of life type of environment where it's permitted and it's okay, well, the doctors are finished with what they can do, so then go look at cannabis as an alternative medicine. I know we share this passion is start with cannabis because it is such a well tolerated natural plant medicine.
Yes. Another risk, and I mentioned this a week or so ago when I was speaking, with Maryland going to recreational use. I'm not sure how much THC content our recreational users are going to have compared to medical. I think there's still a lot of things that are going to evolve with our recreational and medical program in Maryland. But we need to remember, if you have gummies that look like candy, and you have children or pets, you really want to be very aware to keep it away and out of the reach of pets and children. What we don't want to see, I think that some states have seen when they went recreational, is an increase in pediatric THC overdoses in our ER. It's not a good look.
You can overdose on THC?
Well, for children, their bodies are smaller, and too much THC can have some effects. It can cause a mental status change, just like with an adult. If you use too much THC, especially if you're THC naive, too much THC, especially orally, may in
No,
some
that's
people
interesting.
cause an
Now,
anxiety.
now we haven't talked about this before, but so I'm not sure if you know the answer to this one. But when you consume cannabis in different ways, your body processes it differently. So when you smoke it versus a tincture versus ingesting it. So when you eat and consume THC and it goes through the liver, if people that use it, they notice that there's an intensification, if you will, of the THC. So when people say when the there's like a when the gummy kicked in, and then you see these videos of people like not being able to get off their couch, or
Hmm.
is there something there to that
Yes. Yes. And just briefly, going back to too much THC, when you're using cannabis as medicine, you're looking for the smallest amount of THC that gives you symptom relief, that you're not so high that you can't function. It's a biphasic effect. Too little THC or too little anandamide can cause disease symptoms. Too much THC can cause problems also. Um, so going back to your question, one reason I think that as providers we need to be educated, about cannabis and the routes of administration. There are lots of routes of administration for cannabis. The onset of action, the duration, the half-life, possible interactions with other prescription medications. So with THC, when people smoke it, it goes into their lungs, to their bloodstream, and its absorption rate is probably 1 to 3 minutes. And if you're using THC and you're smoking it, then you'll get that psychoactive high pretty quickly. Same with sublingual administration. The onset of action for that sublingual is maybe like 1 to 3 minutes. It's the same idea as giving a chest pain patient nitroglycerin. That's why we would give nitroglycerin sublingual, because the onset of action is pretty rapid. When you swallow it, it goes to your stomach. Your stomach transports it to your liver. Your liver metabolizes that THC molecule and will make it 4 times as strong. And then the onset of action for when you swallow THC can be anywhere, and different people will give you different onset of action, anywhere from maybe 45 minutes to 3 hours, depending on what you just ate. Because these are lipid soluble molecules. So if you have eaten a diet, that's high in fat, and then you take a gummy or an edible, it'll get absorbed quicker because it's in a high fat environment. But for people that aren't familiar with taking THC orally, sometimes you'll hear, people that are used to smoking it have access to a gummy or an edible, and they'll take it, nothing happens. So they'll take more, nothing happens. And then you can get like this THC overdose. And I counsel patients, your liver and kidney will clear it. You don't need to go to the ER. But it'll be a couple uncomfortable hours. You'll never get back. And medical cannabis, the other issue with medical cannabis and social justice, you have to pay out of pocket for this. You don't want to pay out of pocket for something that's going to make you feel worse and not better. And then for my older patients that are new cannabis users, I preface it with, you want to feel better, not worse. And I don't want you to have a bad experience with cannabis and have it turn you off, because, if you know how to use it properly, I think that you're going to get symptom relief and a better quality of life.
Yeah, well, the good news from what I'm hearing that you're saying, there isn't a lethal dose to like when you take a little bit too much THC, you won't feel well. Potentially, you may be confused, you may get tired, you may have some symptoms that are not welcome, but there's not a lethal dose of cannabis. You can't die from it.
So I think there are a few cases, anecdotal cases or studies that people have had a poor outcome after using high THC. There may be other comorbidities. There may be other factors that played into it. We need water to keep our body hydrated. Too much water can cause a water intoxication. Way too much water can cause death. So I do think probably, there are certain amounts of, cannabis that you could consume that could cause a problem, could you, like, typically, like, somebody accessing cannabis in a dispensary for medical or recreational use, could you hit that threshold, that would cause a problem? I think that would be difficult to do.
Mhm.
But like I said, we do want to be careful, with children, that they don't have access, to gummies, and end up in an ER. I think I read recently that, and because I've worked in an ER, I'm kind of passionate too about ER care. But, with the pandemic, we've lost a lot of our healthcare providers. There's a shortage of nurses. And I think Baltimore was found to have some of the longest ER wait times in the nation. So we don't want our ERs clogged with people that are mishandling recreational cannabis gummies. So,
Yeah.
lock them up, keep them away from, your children and your pets.
Yeah. So what's your feel on CBD and how, I mean, we talk a lot about THC because there's a lot of risk there. And now that most of the regulators are only concerned about intoxicating products. And of course they want safe products, and CBD and THC grow out of the same plant along with other compounds like terpenes and stuff that we can talk about on another episode. But what's how does CBD play a role in this? And as far as using CBD as medicine that you don't need to buy at a dispensary, are there any concerns or usage recommendations for that?
So that's an excellent question. And the 2018 Farm Bill allowed CBD to be legal, and I think it's regulated as a supplement, which means it's like the wild, wild west. There have been studies that have been done in other states that had looked at CBD products that were sold over the counter. A lot of them aren't correctly labeled. And these plants are cannabis plants are special. They're biosynthesizers. They pull toxins out of the soil. The cannabis that is sold in the Maryland dispensaries is quality control tested from the grower to the processor to the dispensary, which is one reason, that I think Maryland has an excellent program. For the most part, I think people that are buying medical cannabis in our dispensaries, it's a safe product. Nothing's 100%. And there's always room for improvement. But with CBD products, I always recommend, especially for older patients, to start with CBD products. And then, I need to break it down to why they need CBD products that have a certificate of analysis. Because you don't want people using CBD products that might have contaminants in it. So I do love the hemp CBD industry. I do feel pretty married to people using CBD products that have a certificate of analysis.
All right, that's good to know. And we're going to cut this off now. We've almost gone 30 minutes. I know we really wanted to just start at 10 minutes, but this is how our conversations are.
Okay.
And there's so much more to talk about too. So when we come back the next time, I know there's some things that I really want to talk about, which are really some more guidance on helping people get started with certain products, people that are not using cannabis today and are considering it, and then also people that are using cannabis today but aren't sure that they might be getting the results that they could get because they really were just sort of trying it and just seeing what they can do. Or maybe they took advice from a friend that said, hey, this worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. And I know it's very personal. So there's a lot more to uncover and talk about, Renee, but I want to thank you so much for spending the time to talk to us today. And is there any one thing that you would want to finish this discussion off with?
So, I think people need to educate themselves about safe cannabis use, and, ask the questions of providers, or reach out, to people like yourself, that can help educate and, guide and use this safely.
Great. Well, thank you. So if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the comments. We monitor them, and we can always get you in touch with Renee if you want to connect with her. She does do telemedicine, and she does help people through some challenging times. So thank you all for watching. And Renee, thanks again.
Okay. Take care.